Hello everyone, welcome to my first booktube video. So I got 3 books today centered around the subject of football. Hopefully you can tolerate football. This is not going to be the video for you. First up, I have The Manager, The Absurd Ascent of the Most Important Man in Football by Barney Ronay. Now this is a wildly comical book. The author takes a comical stance on the writing, and much of it could be a stand-up routine. It has that sort of tone. And it is about the Football Manager from the earliest recorded times, namely around 1900-ish, to today. I will read aloud some sections just to give you a taste of the tone of the thing. Following the trade winds and the well-grooved path of imperial conquest, various hopeful mutton-chop types set sail in the early years of the 20th century. Like the dog-collared missionaries of the 19th century, the manager was zealous and energetic. Freed from the feudal ties that bound him at home, he moved happily among the masses. Charles Miller left Southampton in 1894, carrying a ball and a set of rules, and became one of the founding fathers of football in Brazil. In 1907, Jock Hamilton followed him, becoming the first British trainer at a Brazilian club, and returning home with the ominous comment that the combination is really clever. The likes of Miller and Hamilton were still battling against the tide. It would be another 50 years before abroad was taken seriously. The likes of Miller and Hamilton were still battling against the tide. It would be another 50 years before abroad was taken seriously in the manager's founding homeland, a quality it did, at least, share with the manager himself. So they came in a trickle, monk-like, elemental, weather-beaten, fleeing the old country in search of some managerial Eden, most notably in the form of Jimmy Hogan, who left England for Holland in 1910. Hogan's big break came in 1912 when he was invited by Hugo Meisel of Austria to become trainer to the national team for the Olympic Games. Hogan's instinct was for the guru-ish, and the preacherly began to flourish. Hogan's instinct for the guru-ish and the preacherly began to flourish. When he returned to England, he would sign his autographs Jimmy Hogan, the world's #1 coach. He carried a set of business cards describing himself as a football professor. And everything in Austria went swimmingly until the first morning of the 1914-18 war, when Hogan was pulled out of bed, arrested and interned. Bailed out of prison by 2 Viennese department store owners, he spent 2 years playing tennis in a stately home before being shipped off to Budapest. Here he flourished again, building from scratch the all-powerful MTK club, despite being followed everywhere by a policeman, and earning himself the title of the father of Hungarian football. Returning home after the armistice, the father of Hungarian football presented himself at the FA seeking financial help and perhaps a job offer, and was given 3 pairs of khaki tights by Sir Frederick Wall. Duly belittled, he went abroad again and accepted a lucrative post lecturing on football for the German FA. Here Hogan's appalling command of the language almost led to instant dismissal. His hesitant early efforts brought an ultimatum to give a lecture in German, unassisted, in front of 500 students, including his fiercely critical rival coaches. Initially, Hogan made such a hash of it that he was almost laughed off stage. In some desperation, he called an intermission. Backstage, he changed into his football gear and returned to give a demonstration of barefoot juggling and shooting so ferociously that he gashed one of his feet. He left the stage to thunderous applause. Hogan went on to develop a successful travelling stage show. He toured German towns, shooting a ball through a blackboard with a hole in it and booting a whole string bag full into a bucket. One evening, by way of riposte to a local mayor who disapproved of his footballing crusade, he performed 350 successive headed keep-ups. The mayor was a football convert, the Daily Mirror recorded triumphantly. What a guy. So, aside from anecdotes like that, the writing is flamboyant. So, speaking of Bob Paisley here, Mark Lawrenson, now Match of the Day pundit, described his first meeting with Paisley after signing for Liverpool in 1981. When I got in the car, I saw Bob was wearing slippers and a cardigan. They'd just won the European Cup, and there's this fellow who everyone in football thought was an absolute god driving me to the ground in his slippers and cardigan. Those slippers, they even got a mention in his obituary. Paisley was a manager blessed with an inspirational anti-glamour. Occasionally the team's physiotherapist. For a while, he appeared on the edge of Liverpool team photos, dressed in a long white coat. He was also a bricklayer by trade. When he first came to Anfield in 1939, he helped build the manager's bench in his spare time, the same bench the boot room would occupy throughout the glory years. So, as I say, the style is flamboyant, and in fact, this writer over-eggs the pudding quite absurdly at points. Case in point, in Death, Clough has something of the popular folk hero about him, reconfiguring a distinctly English archetype around the props of players, chairmen, goals, saves and trophies. Here we have football's contribution to the lineage of the Athena poster outsider, this time clad in a manager's clothes. Football's Robin Hood, it's Oscar Wilde, Bugs Bunny, it's Batman and it's Zorro. Okay, so I get it, the writer's got a free hand in a book like this, but come on, stay in your lane, bro. But it's continuously funny as well. Speaking of the influence Arsene Wenger had on football in the, whenever he came over, I suppose late 90s, wasn't it? In fact, Wenger's most high-profile innovation has been to do with bodily intake rather than the high-end maths of the instant layoff. Landing in North London during a diet-obsessed decade, Arsenal's new manager would mine a fruitful seam of retarded nutrition and its accompanying neuroses. And pre-Wenger English football really did have its funny ways in the kitchen. For many years, the pre-match meal, object of generations of managerial fascination, was all about meat. In his autobiography, Jimmy Greaves describes heading off to Moody's Cafe in Canning Town, where we would order our pre-match meal of roast beef and Yorkshire pudding with all the trimmings, or pie and mash followed by blackcurrant crumble and custard. Greaves also writes of Gordon Banks tucking into a large steak with peas, both boiled, and roast potatoes, followed by a large bowl of rice pudding, which at least makes Banks' sudden food poisoning in the 1970 World Cup less of an enduring mystery. Incidentally, I later challenged Banks about his preference for both boiled and roast potatoes. He denied it, but then, post-Wenger, he would, wouldn't he? Will Shankly was one of the first to eschew meat, even going so far as to send spies on train journeys to monitor the players' ham roll consumption. Don Howe confirmed that Bertie Mee of Arsenal shared Shankly's aversion. In those days we were eating fillet steak with a fried egg on top, Howe recalled. But Bertie changed all that. He had them eating cornflakes. Bread was an enduring bugbear. One Division 1 manager became so determined that his players eat no more than a single roll at pre-game lunches, he would count up the rolls before and after a meal and demand to know who had eaten any missing ones. At Highbury, Wenger is said to have introduced grilled broccoli to the training ground canteen like a conjurer producing a beautiful white dove from a Homburg hat. Chips, sensationally, were out. Pasta was in. Sauces were served on the side. A single glass of red wine was grandly admitted. In hindsight, this might all sound like a simple common sense, but at the time football reeled, blinded by the brilliant white light of Wenger's uber science. So, yes, cool book. Next we have What Sport Tells Us About Life by Ed Smith. Here it is. So, these are largely unconnected, separate essays on statistics and sport. Reading at random. Let's choose the later example. Start of chapter 9. Freud's Playground. What do Michael Jordan, Richard Wagner and Rupert Murdoch have in common? We have all asked the same question. What keeps the proven champion going? Where can his motivation possibly come from? Surely he has nothing to prove. Often that question prompts us to celebrate the resourcefulness of human nature. I remember watching an aging Andre Agassi win a thrilling Australian Open final. We had imagined Agassi's career would be that of a dazzling showman, quick to tire of the grind of continued excellence. He had proved everyone wrong. The showman had turned relentless pragmatist and ruthlessly got on with the business of winning trophy after trophy. Agassi's victory at Melbourne that night was the high point of what Simon Barnes has called Red Grave, in honour of the 5 times Olympic gold medal winner. I've seen the same quality at first hand with Shane Warne, but 2 matches particularly stick in the memory, both of them very closely fought championship matches between Middlesex and Warne's Hampshire in 2005. In each case, we lost the first and won the second. I got 55 and 60 respectively, not batting especially fluent in either case, but I was out there long enough to see one of the greatest bowlers of all time hunting for victory. Warne was 35 and well past needing to prove anything, and yet here he was, throwing his physical skills and mental agility with the task in hand, if he was proving himself all over again. Even when he didn't bowl his best, we were conscious of his huge and irrepressible will to succeed. It annoyed me when some columnists later wrote, Warne didn't really try in county games, they couldn't have been there. Yet that same capacity of truly great players to defy common sense also has a dark side. Countless elite sportsmen cannot resist one comeback too many. Michael Jordan, having interrupted his basketball career by trying and failing to make it as a baseball player, got through almost as many comebacks as Frank Sinatra before eventually calling time on one final disappointing spell with the Washington Wizards. More tragically for Muhammad Ali, whose matchless willpower survived far beyond his skills, the end came in the form of 2 excruciating defeats against lesser fighters. Watching Ali lose to Trevor Burbeck, Hugh McIlvanney wrote in The Observer at the time, was like watching a prince leave town on the back of a dust cart. But perhaps a certain type of champion, maybe the champion par excellence, seems almost hardwired to seek the final challenge he cannot overcome. Is that the only way the story can end? Maybe the same principle extends far beyond sport to performers in the arts, politicians, or players in elite international business. The pitch, the podium, the boardroom is the stage universal. And what is it that prevents great performers from walking away? Perhaps the answer is closely linked to why they got onto the stage in the first place. In a series of interviews on Radio 3 called Peak Performance, I spoke to classical musicians about their lives as performers, in particular why they had taken up music in the first place. It was intended as a dialogue rather than a conversational interview. I had become interested in the similarities between sporting temperaments and other types of performer, and I was trying to draw out any parallels there might be between what I had experienced and observed as a sportsman and what they had gone through in music. I anticipated many of the recurring themes: nerves, pressure, ambition, fear of failure, connecting with the audience, concentration, solitude, resilience and practice. But I hadn't expected to hear quite so much about one thing: childhood. I'll leave it there. So this is very interesting to pick up and put down again. You can there's no real progression through the chapters. They are completely unconnected essays, and you can more or less read them at random. Each one about 10 pages or so. Coffee, please. Lastly, we have Barca, the rise and fall of the club that built modern football, by Simon Kuper, Kuper. So this is full of I was there moments. Simon Kuper was a correspondent, a sports writer for a newspaper, working in Spain and frequently interviewing the players he's writing about in this book. So it's super interesting and very authentic. You are up close and personal with a lot of the most famous people that played for Barcelona in the last 10-20 years. I should point out that this book was published in 2021, so it's very current compared to many of the books I'm reading at the moment. The writing style is authoritative, but also it has lots of novelistic flourishes, a deep vein of narrative thrust to it, which keeps you. It's quite riveting, actually. And I'm going to read something that illustrates what I mean here. On Monday, December the 20th, 1999, the Brazilian forward Rivaldo woke up in the Princesa Sofia Hotel, up the street from the Camp Nou. His family had already flown to Brazil for their Christmas holidays, and he hadn't wanted to be alone in a big house. He was due at the club at 9 a.m. After Barcelona's coach Louis van Gaal finished analysing the previous night's 2-1 victory over Atletico Madrid, Rivaldo requested permission to speak. "Listen," he said in his Portuguese-tinted Spanish. "I have respect for the coach and for everybody here, but I won't play outside left anymore." "Okay," said Van Gaal calmly. "Does anyone else have something to say?" A light training session followed, after which Rivaldo gave a press conference. 20 journalists, still unaware of his speech to the squad, interrogated him about the vote for European Footballer of the Year. The magazine France Football had awarded the prize since 1956. Whoever wins it becomes a legend. "No comment," said Rivaldo. "The rest of the vote isn't known yet." "Everyone knows it's you," pleaded the journalists. Then he drove to the airport to collect the handball player, Inaki, a son-in-law of King Juan Carlos. That afternoon, they did an event for charity. Rivaldo and his agent, Manuel Ose, "I'm not his agent, I'm his friend," asked me not to write about it. Rivaldo didn't do these things for his image. 3 hours late, dressed in black, the exhausted Brazilian arrives on the 19th floor of the Princesa Sofia. Inaki had been delayed and the charity event had run late. Rivaldo groans when he sees my long list of questions, but sits down and tries to answer. At one point he says, "I have played on the wing for a while now, and I want to play in the centre again. For years I have been doing things for the team and I do nothing for myself. I want to enjoy more, to play in my own position." When we finish, he poses for photographs for his boot sponsor. Meanwhile, his Nokia phone keeps ringing, so he hands the thing to Manuel. Everyone is calling to congratulate him because many media are reporting that he has won the Ballon d'Or. "I'm not here," says Rivaldo, posing with a flat ball. "Is he now officially Player of the Year?" I ask Manuel. "Well, I don't know," says Manuel. "We haven't heard anything." "Call France Football," Rivaldo suggests. "Good idea." Manuel taps in the number and the phone rings for a long time. Finally, somebody in Paris answers. "Vincent," says Manuel. Rivaldo goes and stands next to him and listens in. Vincent confirms that Rivaldo has been voted the European Footballer of the Year for 1999. Vale. Okay, says Rivaldo. "We congratulate him." "Thank you," he says, and takes the phone from Manuel and walks onto the roof terrace. Alone, he looks across the city towards the dark Tibidabo mountain. Directly in front of him is a branch of El Corte Inglés, the department store. The clock on its wall outside gives the time as 1923 hours. From now on, Rivaldo is officially a legend. Did he already know he'd won? "Yes," grins Manuel. "He had to pose for a photograph with a golden ball." "Has he celebrated yet?" "Celebrated? He hasn't even had his lunch today. He's been busy." Rivaldo returns the phone to Manuel and resumes posing. Manuel shows me the thing. The screen constantly reports 3 callers waiting. Whichever one of them hangs up, a new one appears immediately. Then Rivaldo sits for an hour in a small, hot, windowless room under a barrage of lights giving TV interviews. People stream in and out to get a photograph with him, an autograph, a kiss. Anyone who notices his exhaustion makes a little joke or consoling remark. At about 9 p.m. he finally reaches the hotel lobby, where he feints his way past a pack of journalists. He has almost speed-walked into his Mercedes people carrier when the hotel concierge imprisons him in a hug. The journalists catch up. Rivaldo struggles into his Mercedes, but they stand in front of it. After a standoff lasting several minutes, they finally let him drive to his empty house. In the bath, he'll have a chance to think about the day. The day after, Van Gaal kicked him out of the squad for refusing to play on the wing, but Barca drew their first game without Rivaldo, and public opinion sided with the player. Guardiola, the captain, went to Van Gaal to ask him to let Rivaldo play number 10. The Dutchman reluctantly agreed. Years later, he grumbled to the journalist Jonathan Wilson. Then he played at 10 and we didn't win anything anymore because it was chaos. Van Gaal left at the end of the season after multiple conflicts with his Brazilian players and no prizes. He had learned what happens in modern football when the talent clashes with the club. The talent wins. So that is a taste of the tone of the book. There's a section on Cruyff which reads like a novel in and of itself. Cruyff is a very interesting and strident character. Must remember to see if I can find a book on Cruyff. Also, they discover Messi, who at 13 years old went to Barcelona and stayed there for more or less the entirety of his career. And they, in Messi, accidentally discover probably the greatest footballer who's ever existed. Statistically, he is the best. However, the rise and fall of Barcelona is a bit rough. They never really fell. After all, they've always been more or less top 10 in Europe, so I'm not sure where the fall comes in. But still, this is a terrific and rivetingly written book. So that is that. So I hope you got something out of that. I will make some further videos about other books. A lot of sport books I've read recently. Some history, not a lot of fiction, to be honest. So I will continue at a later time. Thanks for watching.